Okay, so again, I'll be talking about the Carnegie Scholars. This picture that's on the screen appeared in a GSLIS alumni publication in 2013. And when I saw the picture, I immediately thought, I need to know who these people are, and I want to know, their GSLIS story and how that can impact and influence what we're doing today. So the Carnegie Scholars, this was a group of 28 students, primarily Black and Hispanic or Latino, Latina. And these students were here from 1970 to 1972. And so this program was spearheaded and directed by Dr. Terry Crowley, and Dr. Crowley is the gentleman seated at the far end of that table. And so described by Dr. Crowley as an unusual, flawed, but ultimately successful program to increase the number of disadvantaged students, primarily Black and Hispanic, in the profession. So the brief amount of time that I have with you today, I'll be talking about the first part of the study, which is going through the archives of this student group. The second part of the study, which I'm in process and will continue for some time, will be to interview as many of these scholars as I can locate and will actually talk to me. For reasons that will become clear in the next couple of slides, they are very reluctant to talk to me, and it's proving a little bit more challenging than I had anticipated, but I am going to get some of them to talk to me. So to give you a little historical context, university-wide, in 1967, there were only 372 Black students that were enrolled as undergraduates here at the university, out of a total of 30,400 students. And so that was recognized as a concern, and the university launched an initiative entitled Project 500. And so the goal was to then get 500 Black students to enroll in the freshman class. And they did achieve that by 1968. And so when we get to the Carnegie Scholars, by 1970, the grant was put in 1969. This was demonstrative of the momentum on the university campus to have more minority students in all departments and all programs. So the Carnegie program was initially funded by the Carnegie Foundation, which provided $65,000 for the first year, and in the second year, the remainder of those funds, plus a grant from the Department of Education, was used to fund the second class in 1971. So I just have listed the names of the scholars that came through the program. So the main thing that's emerging from the first part, the archival research, is a problem of language that is in the grant application, language that is in student records, grade reports, etc. So I do want to emphasize that in the presentation. So to begin with, the program sought students from weaker schools, and these weaker schools are those in large urban areas or isolated Black colleges in the South, which we now refer to as historically Black colleges and universities. These students needed to demonstrate their disadvantaged backgrounds, emphasize their minimal academic preparation, and consequently their need for remedial work. They also needed to describe how they were socially or culturally, they were from socially or culturally deprived backgrounds. So what's coming through is that these students didn't necessarily meet this particular criteria, but in order to meet the criteria of the funding, this was part of the profile that they then had to build for themselves. So after arriving on campus, so in the first year we have 10 students, they were asked to take diagnostic tests that were typically used for freshmen, undergrad students, to ascertain their level of remedial work that would be required. And so, not surprisingly, the students were not happy with this. And they went into the dean's office at the time, Herbert Goldhor, and essentially told him they would not take the test, they would not engage in the remedial coursework. All of these students had bachelor's degrees, just like all of you in graduate school, and they had to adhere to the requirements of the graduate school of the University of Illinois. So there was indeed some academic preparation there. So to his credit, Dr. Crowley, in reports detailing the first year of the program, he acknowledged the faults, of the program, and he acknowledged the assumptions that the students admitted were not the pliable, submissive, compliant individuals we had expected. It was only after this tumultuous time with the scholars did the program realize that students were actually an asset to the entire program, that they should not be isolated from the rest of the student body, and that they were not a liability or a poor group of students that needed to be rescued and propped up. Dean at the time, Herbert Goldhorst, said, "Some very talented students we have discovered are to be found in this group. Their leadership and academic strength are important in group dynamics. It is also important for the faculty to know that the program has students with considerable academic potential." So there were some changes made for year 2. Unfortunately, it might have been a little bit too little too late. There were still some hard feelings with the students from year 1. It appears that the students from year 2 fared a little better. So these are the ID pictures, just some of them from some of the students. I wanted to emphasize that these scholars were and are real people. I think that that is a fact that sometimes became lost and contributed to the problems that the scholars had. In his reports, Dr. Crowley also acknowledged a lack of faculty support for the program, which was abundantly evident in the archives. So in the archives, there are correspondence, there are letters, lots of things going on. One of the sets of documents that are in the archives are grade reports. So for every class, each faculty member had to handwrite or type cards evaluating the student. I, for one, am glad we no longer have to do that. So what was happening in some of these documents, there were a couple of documents where students were asked to evaluate the program, and some of their comments included that courses at the school lacked minority perspective. They were very upset about the remedial work. They thought it was unnecessary and insulting. And they actually said, they used the words neglectful when referring to the faculty, and they said that the faculty projected negative attitudes towards them. One quote stated, "Faculty persisted in the idea that minority students in the program were incapable of competing on an equal basis with non-minority students, even though their academic backgrounds and performance in school indicated otherwise." So when we get to the grade reports, that the faculty wrote about this particular group of students. And it should be noted that this is not representative of all the faculty. Some comments included, "She's a sturdy girl, far superior to the other blacks. She's aggressive in grade grubbing. She's argumentative. I wonder how she found a husband. Works hard to keep up with the bottom of the class. Well-groomed black. Large girl, but pleasant manner. Keeps to his own group and not very well versed in white culture." Now, I don't even have enough time to tell you what's wrong with all of these comments. So I will settle for giving you a few general observations. The comments were much harsher and more sternly worded about the female students. The comments came from, as I mentioned, a few instructors consistently. So it didn't really matter what other faculty members said. There were instances of having one student, other faculty members said, "She's a joy, she's a delight, she's very smart," and the consistent faculty members always had negative responses. So it didn't matter that their comments were not in line with their colleagues. These second year comments were less harsh, thankfully. And so really just in terms of the assumptions that were being made and the language that was being used to convey these assumptions. They're false, they're dangerous, and they hinder the field. And even almost 40 years later, we're still seeing some of the effects of these types of stereotypes, this type of language, et cetera, and it's something that needs to be addressed in many ways. So just to conclude, I want to talk just briefly about how history is now repeating itself. So I mentioned to you Project 500. And so in a News Gazette article last October of 2014, they reported that this academic year, there were 356 African Americans enrolled in the incoming freshman class. That is lower than the number in 1967. And not since the Carnegie Scholars has GSLIS had as many minority students enrolled and matriculating at one time. So we're seeing a return to a problematic point in history in terms of minority representation in higher education. So there's a recruitment, retention, and climate problem at play here, and this is at an institutional level and also in our field of library and information science. And so our communities are diverse, and our profession and our institutions on higher ed should reflect this sufficiently and consistently. And so I would just like to conclude by saying, you know, I would challenge everyone, all of us in this community, to think about how do we go about rectifying this. So this is, you know, by no means an easy solution. But how do we go about fixing this, and why is it important to have representation in our classrooms and in our institutions? Thank you.
Any questions, any comments? Dr. McDowell, if we can get the talking stick, and then...
One quick question was, you gave that number, which is...
Right. Kate, can we just wait till we get you a mic, because we are broadcasting out to the world, and that's our mechanism.
Thank you. Quick question, which has to do essentially with the ratio, because you'd given a sense of, it was 1% in 1968 with a 30,000 undergrad enrollment. Do you know the 2014 undergrad enrollment? It's not. I was trying to think about what the percent is now, if the percent hasn't gone down, in addition to the number.
No, the number, and I'm sorry, I forgot to include that.
That's okay.
I want to say it's well over 40.
Okay. Right. So
yes.
It's a significant decrease in both directions.
Right.
Thank you.
Yes.
That's what I was wondering.
Yes.
There we go. Artie?
On the second list of students, one of them had an asterisk. I was just curious as to what the asterisk signified.
Yeah. Oh, I think I know what it is. He did not graduate, and I skipped over that. So out of the 28 students, all but one actually graduated. And so several of these people in both columns went on to be leaders in the field, but Mr. Garcia did not graduate. I was told that he was dissatisfied with the program and he didn't like Illinois, so he left.
Come on the mic and ask you a question. So you said earlier that there's resistance to talk to you.
Yes.
Can you speak to what they've been saying as why, and wouldn't they see this as a mechanism to make the world better?
Yeah, I would hope that they would want to assist. And so I guess I should say that I am in regular contact with one of the fellows who has been acting as a gatekeeper of sorts. This has been a very difficult group to actually locate and then actually to, begin trying to contact. A lot of what I'm being told is that there were some people that left the field, and so they're just not going to answer either way. I've been told that other people are still bitter almost 40 years later, and they don't want to talk about it. To be fair, some of them have spoken to me already and have had very positive experiences, so that's good. And I've had a couple people say, I don't actually remember 1970 to 72, so there's not a whole lot I can tell you about it. So, yeah. But there is a little reluctance just in terms of, I guess it's just something they don't want to talk about.
Illinois.